as I was going up an elevation on both sides of me, both sides of the trail, there was, as I walked, it walked. As I walked, it walked. And I stopped. And if you've ever been in a blind panic where your adrenals kick in and you were like, your life is in danger, and it's all adrenal. It's an adrenal reaction. And I was like, I've got to get to the camp. I got to get to camp. So I kept walking faster and faster, and these things were following me up. And when I hit the point where I had to go up that 30 feet back to the thing, I stopped on the trail because I had to actually pivot and then walk up a steep incline, which you're already tired once you hit that point. I had to walk up that steep incline, and I turned to my right, and there was the juvenile was right there. And it was lanky, it was silver gray, it was about 6.5, 7 feet tall, and it looked at me and it grinned. It gave me a grin, which is a threat gesture with primates, but it grinned at me like it was smiling at me. And then it dove behind a tree. And then I turned to my left, and coming up the ridge line, coming up like this, because the trail was on an incline, I saw a creature in silhouette that was well over 8 feet tall, and it was humongous. It was much bigger than what I'm interpreting as a juvenile. And this thing looked like the Patterson Gimlin creature as far as its stature and its arms, and its arms were down past its knees, and it was coming right up the creek bed, like it was coming up towards me where I'm standing on the path, like it was coming up like this, and I could see it in silhouette. And then when I looked, and of course I'm in a panic, so I'm running up the hill. At this point, I hit the camp where my friend is setting up camp, and I am white. Now I'm a type 1 diabetic, so I take insulin to live, to survive. And he looked at me thinking I was having a diabetic incident, and he's like, what's wrong? And I'm like, and he goes, is your blood sugars really low? And I said, no, I just saw two of them. That's what came out of my mouth. And I just fell onto the floor of the camp. I just fell. I was in so much disarray. And he said he jumped over me and went towards the trail to see if he could still see them. Of course, they were gone at that point. And that was just the start of my evening. So so we're setting up camp. I'm telling him what I saw. He was like almost in disbelief because he wasn't there. He didn't see it with me. I mean, that's what was so extraordinary. So two eyewitnesses, two people who could have seen this amazing thing. One was driven off and gone, and then the other one was setting up camp. And this happened while I was going back to camp. So so then that wasn't the terrifying part. The terrifying part was later that evening. So we decided not to light a fire. We decided to have a cold camp because we knew that they were in the area. And sometimes campfires attract them, I've heard, and sometimes they detract from them. So we just had this agreement. Let's not have a fire. So I had a bedroll, and I had bedrolled myself outside, and my friend had a small pup tent that he crawled into. And it was kind of, it was October, so it wasn't really freezing cold yet. It was that kind of hunting season, kind of chill in the air, but not too crazy. So I said, look, I'm going to sleep out on the bedroll, and we'll see what happens. They came back, and they came back with friends. So it wasn't just the two that I think. I could hear at least two others. And you have to understand the way Seneca Creek is it's this small canyon creek. So the creek goes off in both directions, and we're up. So about, I don't know, it was about midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, we could hear them calling back and forth to each other. We could hear them calling back and forth and back and forth, up and down the canyon. And they kept the calls kept getting closer and closer and closer. And we could hear them walking up the sides of the ridge towards us. So it's almost like they were triangulating our position. And then they began to hoot and holler, and we could hear them running around our camp. We couldn't see them, but we could hear them bipedally running in circles around our camp. They were throwing small pebbles at us, not big stones, And I'll go a little bit into that in just a second. But we could hear them pitching stones at us. And at one point, and my friend was so terrified by the yelling and the scream. This went on for a long period. It wasn't like a few hoot and howls. This went on for like 2 hours. They were trying to intimidate us to get off the mountain, but we couldn't leave because it was such steep terrain. We would have killed ourselves trying to get out of the woods back to the back, and we had nobody to drive us home. So it would have been one hell of a long walk home, on a back country road. So, we ended up, just sticking it out and staying there. But I'll never forget this. It got so terrifying. We had no guns. No guns. This is Maryland. We have no guns. I think I had a pocket knife on me. I think I had a Swiss Army pocket knife. These things are, making hoot and howl, yelling, screaming. And then it would die down and it would pick back up. So he was so terrified. He was in his tent and would not leave. I'm on a bedroll exposed. So I'm like, nerves of steel going on here. Had we had a FLIR, had we had the proper equipment, it would have been the sighting of a lifetime with evidence.
I was going to say, you'd have been PG film part 2.
Yeah, exactly.
Evidence.
Tell people, I said, the most extraordinary Bigfoot encounter of my life, I had no equipment. But I will tell you, after I had this experience, I told people about it, and I've told the story to a few other. I've been on a couple of podcasts where I've talked about this. But what was the most extraordinary thing in the evening was a call that I had never heard anyone ever talk about until about 5 years ago on another podcast. So one of the most extraordinary things that I heard was up. So this ridge line had smaller ridges alongside of it. So there were almost like dips in a hill kind of thing. To my right, far right, what I heard was two of these individuals clicking back and forth, talking what are called palatal clicks in languages. So if you this does occur in human language, but it occurs with vowels and with sounds. So some of the languages of South Africa, Juntoise, where the languages is interspersed with clicks. It does occur in human languages, but this was all clicking back and forth as if it was a language without any vowels, without any other vocalizations, just the clicking. And it went on. This went on constantly, back and forth, and then it stopped. And I'm like, what am I listening to? And I mean, it was at a very fast-paced clicking sound. And this went on, and I'm going like, I need a recorder. I need, and then I bookmarked that in my head. And several years later, after this incident happened, I was listening to some podcast, and there was a woman who had had a sighting in a national park with her husband. And she said, "You'll never believe what I heard. I heard two of these creatures clicking back and forth." And I'm like, oh my God. And not everybody reports this, but I'm hearing more and more people talk about this clicking language that they do, this clicking back and forth. And I mean, I'm trained in anthropology. I know what this occurs in human language and how it occurs in human language, but I've never heard of people in other researchers, but a handful mention this. And I was always very like, I'm not telling people about this because they're going to think, I mean, even having a Bigfoot sighting is crazy enough for some people, but then to talk about this, I did hear, the traditional, the screams that were going on, the hoops and howls that they did. Also the chatter that you hear in the Sierra sound recordings. I did hear some chatter.